bans. Unfortunately, there is a bug right now where we cannot see bans, but we will go over the picks. So on blue team, we have a Lee Sin. I'm not sure if they haven't swapped yet or not, and I'm not sure what role they're picked for. I'm assuming here that is a Lee Sin jungle and a Gragas mid, but it could be the other way around. I don't know. We've seen some strange things in these workshops, and that's perfectly fine. We then have a Mundo top and a Lucian Morgana bot lane. Morgana is gaining a lot of popularity as a support. She requires very careful positioning and very careful trades because she is very, very squishy, and if you miss her Q, it's a very long cooldown, and you're pretty much useless while it's not up. Same with your Black Shield. If they bait it out, they're just going to dive you if you're at all out of position. Then that's going to be versus what appears to be a Yasuo mid, a Renekton top, a Vayne Lulu bot lane, and a Sejuani jungle. Bans were Thresh, Vi, and Panth on the Sejuani side. Those are pretty common bans right now. Thresh is not banned as often as I might like to see, just because there are so many stronger picks right now in terms of like the Flavor of the Month junglers and mids, but he is a terrifying support when played well. So then the other side bans were Kassadin, Elise, and LeBlanc, which again, really standard. They're strong picks right now. Nothing out of the ordinary. Requiem, do you want to talk about any of the team comp here in terms of like how things are going to scale, lanes are going to go?
Sure. For blue team, I'm a little hesitant to endorse the Morgana pick. Morgana has risen to popularity as a response to the Thresh, Annie, Leona, Holy Trinity on bot. Her attitude is, you want to go all in? Fine, let's dance. Against the Lulu poke lane, I'm not 100% sure how efficient Morgana will be. I mean, if she lands a binding, Lulu is a low mobility support, but we'll see how it works out. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard team. They have a pretty good mix of scaling. They have, but they do look a little bit early game with the Lee Sin and the Lucian pick. As for purple team, I'm really excited to see Yasuo. Yasuo is a very binary champ. You either understand how his kit works and you do quite well, or you sort of flounder while you figure out how to efficiently use his skills. Renekton is a very popular top lane pick. Vayne is a late game monster, so it'll be interesting to see how far the game goes. I'm also excited about the Sejuani pick. Sejuani actually was very underwhelming because she had a bug where she did not do health percentage damage. Now that that's fixed, she is an Amumu that is slightly more difficult to play. She is extremely vulnerable to counter jungling, but her team fight is just insane. So I really like purple team's team fight phase, but if blue team mobilizes, counter jungles, and bullies early, this could be a very one-sided match.
Okay, so apparently they did not trade, and it's a Gragas jungle with a Lee Sin mid.
That just really, I think, enhances the early game aspect of their team. Lee Sin is an assassin early and a tank late game. So we'll see how they are able to really take their early game dominance, and if they're able to translate that into a tangible goal difference.
My concern is that, as you already mentioned, Sejuani is very weak to early counter jungling. Lee Sin is the perfect pick to just like make Sejuani cry every time she tries to do a jungle camp. Gragas, not so much. Gragas needs to farm and scale up. Until he hits level... Well, his dueling is okay, but until he gets level 6, he doesn't have that much damage. And he's kind of just concerned about farming, maybe landing a quick assist or two, but mostly he just wants that ult so that he can start initiating fights easy.
Right, Sejuani can just Q away from Gragas. He doesn't really have... He has a similarly ranged dash, and he has ranged spells, but he can't really force Sejuani to stand and fight. Lee Sin has such superior mobility that if they encounter each other in the jungle, it's a foregone conclusion for Lee Sin. Gragas, not so much. Counter jungling is just an insanely effective tactic that gets no love at lower elos. So it's quite possible Sejuani will be able to go about her merry way in the jungle. We'll see whether that's the case or not.
Anytime I see junglers that are just going to be able to essentially just do a farm game, that worries me, because that's saying you don't appreciate the power of counter jungling, and you're not having enough impact early in the game to really be a good jungler. And again, that's not an insult to either of the junglers on these teams, but my concern is that in solo queue, junglers are so good at carrying games because they have a massive impact on a large number of lanes very early in the game. And that's really how you carry games. You show up level 2 gank, you show up level 3 gank, you land that early gank, and then you translate that power into every single lane. Even if you're not necessarily in those lanes, there's always the terror of, oh my god, there's a Lee Sin with 3 kills running around, we have to play careful, we can't risk fighting. And having that terror instilled in the enemy team is more powerful than you can even begin to describe. Like, it's just huge. And so if you're just playing a farm jungler, you've thrown away that early advantage, and you're banking on each of your lanes not feeding, each of your lanes surviving, and then you're also banking on the fact that you're going to be able to have a significant impact mid-game.
Sejuani is not as weak as some junglers who really rely on their ult in the pre-6 stages. Her Q and her E means that she can effectively gank if the enemy lane is pushed and not warded. So that's quite a gamble. I mean, she's not entirely helpless, but her early game does sort of rely on the enemy team making mistakes, which is never good.
Yeah, and I always say, every time I talk to someone and they're saying how, like, oh, Blitzcrank mid is so good because you just pull them into your tower, or Leona's good because you wait for them to dive you and you stun them in your tower, or something like that. That is you gambling on the enemy making a dumb choice. And if that's your entire strategy for the laning phase, what happens when you encounter someone who doesn't fall for your tricks?
That being said, Leona mid was actually really popular during, I believe, Season 2 and 3 in China, because you would put, like, a carry in the jungle, like Nocturne, and just feed kills, which was hilarious, and I loved it.
Yeah, Leona lane Leona, I suppose it would be, is not bad, but I've had a lot of people argue with me in chat about how these very, very niche picks are so powerful, and it's like, you can make them work, but you're pretty much just gambling on your opponents being dumb. And what happens when you make it to insert rating here, where the average player kind of knows your tricks?
Yasuo, I'm interested to see how he does in team fights. When I first looked at their lineup, I was a little disappointed that we didn't see, for instance, a Janna, a Malphite, someone who basically just enables his ult. But on second glance, you have Sejuani Q and Lulu R, so we might see some really good synergy coming out in team fights.
My only concern with that, though, is Lulu is going to have to constantly be peeling for Vayne. So your main initiation knock-up tool in order to set up the easy Yasuo ult, you kind of don't want to use it, because then your AD carry is left almost helpless. I'm not saying that it won't work, because you could definitely land a really nice Sedge ult followed by her dashing in, Lulu knocking up, and then Yasuo going in. Boom, wombo combo, you just got 3, 4, 5 kills. But if any of those skills miss, you've just wasted a huge peel skill that you're going to need to make Vayne the huge late game threat that she wants to be.
Looking at starting items, we're seeing pretty standard starts. Spell Thief, wards on Morgana, Machete on both junglers. Actually, Spell Thief on both supports right now, and that's not surprising. Spell Thief, since the changes, is incredibly strong, and actually it might be a little overpowered right now. And then in mid, we have 2 Doran's Blades. So pretty standard picks, no real surprises in the first item builds.
I also want to point out, I was watching a lot of the games yesterday, and I was just trying to keep an eye on, like, yeah, everyone builds Spell Thieves now, but do they finish it? Do they keep it? And no, you do not upgrade the Spell Thief in the current meta, anyways, from what I've seen. You use it to rush your Sightstone faster, and then you sell it once you can get a Talisman of Ascension.
Right, the active on Spell Thief is not bad, but Ancient Coin just blows it out of the water. Or Talisman of Ascension, the fully upgraded Ancient Coin, rather.
Yeah, Talisman is just such a strong item. And I'm very guilty of that, where I'm not upgrading it, or I'm not selling my Spell Thieves in order to get it. And that's a habit I need to get into, and I totally agree with it. It's just one of those things where you don't think of building an item so that you can afford other items, that you can sell it, right? That's not generally what people think to do. We have a good trade coming in top lane. I want to point out that Mundo has terrible early laning phase. whereas Renekton is a huge lane bully. So on Coffee Dave's standpoint, I'm not sure if he got caught out there or what exactly set up that fight, but he does not want to fight Renekton. He needs to farm as carefully as he can, and he needs to survive until he's level 6 and has some sustain, until he has some items and can actually duel a little bit more effectively. We do see Sejuani coming in bot lane. Morgana Binding comes out, just disengages the fight very easily. But we do see that Lulu is very low, and that was one of our concerns, where Lulu's a poke lane, but if she's caught out, she's going to take a huge amount of damage.
Right, Lulu's base MS is just very low, and she doesn't, unless she whimsies herself, which I'm not a huge fan of, then I'm just really concerned about her survival in bot lane.
We do see mid lane trading kills. Gragas landed a gank, and then he just sort of stepped back and started healing. And Lee Sin just kept chasing. He wanted the kill really, really badly. He ignited. They ended up just trading. So, not the worst thing ever, because Gragas is going to get an assist, so it's worth it in terms of gold. But it's a little bit questionable why Gragas was going back, or why they were fighting when that's what he was doing.
As for top lane, Renekton currently serves as the gatekeeper for top lane. He is a you must be this tall to shine. If you cannot stand up against Renekton, the champion is not viable in top lane, is a simple way of putting it. So Mundo really has to be careful against Renekton. He needs to just play passively, get as much farm as possible, and try not to engage when he doesn't have to.
Now, I would point out that bot lane, Lucian is a little bit ahead in CS, but that's what you expect. Vayne is sort of expected to lose most bot lanes in exchange for having a strong late game. The question is, are they going to be able to safely get there? Morgana is landing some really nice bindings. Every time I look bot lane, she seems to be landing them, and that's a lot of pain going down onto both Lulu and onto Vayne. Lucian is doing a pretty good job of following up, but he's very low on mana, and I'm not sure if that's him using skills to try and push the wave, or if it's that he's using it to harass. I just haven't been able to check that often. But if I were him, I'd point out that you're going to win any trade with Vayne at this stage of the game, so you should be saving that mana for those fights rather than using it to try and push lane. We see Sejuani coming in mid, not quite able to connect with the Lee Sin. Lee Sin trades a little bit of damage backwards, but nothing's really going to come of it here.
They say about Vayne, lose lane, win game. And people tend to take both of those extremes for granted. They will stand and fight a Vayne who is just landing silver bolts on them with a support at her side. And then they will assume that no matter what, they'll just become an absolute monster late game, no worries, right? Not always. Vayne does need farm. She can't just suddenly magically 1v5 your team as soon as the game hits 40 minutes. So...
yeah, she's item reliant, not experience reliant. Whereas people like Kassadin, the main complaint with Kassadin is that he is experience reliant, not item reliant. You can have almost 0 items on him and still do really, really well, because you show up and you get a kill.
Lee Sin lands a beautiful Q in mid lane on Yasuo. Yasuo unable to win wall. Lee Sin goes and picks up the kill, evening out the gold score. There's only 100 gold difference right now. That's not great for Yasuo, so I'm a little concerned about how he will do in lane now. Now, pretty much all of that gold advantage is just the CS that Lucian's picking up. So at this point of the game, no one's really that far ahead. Renekton obviously winning top lane, but then that same amount of gold is going back bot to Lucian. Right, purple team needs to act like they need to just bide their time and wait for late game and farm up. Blue team needs to be an octopus. They need to be extending control all over the map. They need to be fighting. They need to be taking objectives. Obviously, it's a little early for that right now, but the longer laning phase goes, the worse our chances look.
The exception to that would be top lane. You want to essentially accelerate top lane delay top lane while accelerating mid and bot. And the reason behind that is that Mundo scales really, really well. As you continue the game, he becomes an unkillable monster, whereas Renekton, unless he's fed, he kind of falls off. That's not to say you lose come late game as Renekton. It just means he's a little bit less dominant at that stage of the game, whereas Mundo scales up. The exact opposite is true of the mid and bot lane. Yasuo and Vayne are huge late game. So from Blue's side, they want to accelerate, they want to gank, they want to roam, they want to set up plays mid and bot and shut down those lanes and essentially just end that laning phase. Take the tower, move on to objectives, move on to roaming, move on to grouping. Whereas top lane, they kind of just want that Mundo just farming up and scaling for the late game.
We also discussed Sejuani, how Sejuani is a very effective team fighter, but not that great with clearing, and especially poor at early game dueling. And yet she's able to just farm her jungle, pick up buffs, no worries. So blue team is really going to regret that, I believe, once it turns to team fighting phase. This is where trinket wards come in handy. During the first parts of the game, you can actually put a ward at, in their jungle, at your jungle, just to set up defending your jungle and attacking theirs. They are currently changing it so you cannot drop a ward, a trinket ward, until I believe like 150 or 2 minutes or something like that. But you should always be ready to move with your jungler. I see a lot of lanes just continuing to farm as jungle skirmishes are going on, and I do not like that very much. I would rather teams go in and turn it into a skirmish with multiple players.
I also have a complaint about Lee Sin's play mid lane. I was just looking at a trade he did with Yasuo. He went around the wind wall, got in behind, and auto-attacked Yasuo. That's great. That's your engage. He then ulted and Q'd a minion by mistake. On Lee Sin, you lead with Q. So as soon as you land an auto attack, as soon as the auto attack completes, you launch your Q, use your ult, so it kicks them away and lowers their health, and then you use Q to pull yourself back to them. It would have knocked Yasuo closer to his tower, would have lowered his health, and increased the Q execute damage, because it's based on missing health. And then you can use E to slow them, you can use Ignite, etc., etc. But generally, that's your combo. That's how he works. And so I just had a little complaint there. I'm not sure if he just didn't have enough energy or the cooldowns were slightly off, but just the way he execute that combo was a little sloppy and made me a little sad. Sejuani landing a beautiful ult bot lane onto Morgana. I'm not sure if the Morgana didn't... No, her Black Shield was up, but she did not use it. That surprises me. You should have at least one hotkey set for self-cast, so that when something like that happens, you can just face tank it, be like, okay, hit me with a Sejuani, I'll Black Shield, and just walk away. She still had, I believe... No, her flash was used in that gank, so she could have Black Shielded and then flashed.
Sejuani picking up a kill should be very concerning to blue team. It looks like a dragon as well. Sejuani is a team fight monster. I cannot stress that enough. Her ult is a ranged Amumu ult. She doesn't even have to put herself in the same danger as Amumu ult. So, her picking up kills, picking up a dragon, blue team really need to be aggressively trying to stop this gold advantage that purple's building up. And it looks like blue team is moving to contest dragon. Too late to actually take it, but they are trying to pick up some kills.
Yeah, the collapse from blue team was a little bit sloppy. Lucian unfortunately did not have ult to throw in there. I think Lee Sin should have been able to stall them a little bit better to keep them in range for Lucian. Lucian just needed that tiny bit of extra damage. He was very, very close. They landed some okay damage, but I think it could have been done a little bit more smooth if they just communicated a little bit better and collapsed at the same time.
What concerns me about blue team right now is a lot of people seem to act as though laning phase is mandatory, as though you are contractually obligated to sit there and farm and lane. I'd like to see more invades, more skirmishes in the jungle, more objective control, just generally more trying to press your early game advantage.
And I would like to see the Yasuo combined with some of these knockups. Like, they don't have a lot, as we said earlier, but the dash from Sejuani should work, and she just kind of seems to be ignoring him. They should be able to land really, really easy fights with those two, because you have enough lockdown at that point to one-shot pretty much anyone.
Just a small quibble. Sejuani picks up swiftness boots. Mobility boots did get gutted, so I understand the choice. I personally prefer tank boots on Sejuani, as she needs the help when she's in the middle of a team fight, and the extra one movement speed isn't as crucial on her as it is on, say, Amumu, especially because she has a built-in AoE slow on her kit.
I want to give a good compliment here to Vayne. Morgana went a little bit too close, a little bit aggressive, and immediately she tumble condemned into the wall, and they were able to chase that down for a free kill. Good reaction there. I know, yeah, you're having a little bit of a rough lane. but good job picking that up. In the meantime, Lee Sin does get a kill mid lane using his Ignite and ult. Very close on that Yasuo. Great job being able to get that. Oh, good. Safeguard just barely saves him. That was really good teamwork between the Gragas and the Lee Sin. Both of them have essentially no health, but they're just trading aggro back and forth just well enough for them to be able to pick up those kills and neither of them dying. Sure, you can claim some of that was luck, but I just like how they played as a team there.
For instance, Lucian on bot lane gets a lot of harass down onto Vayne. Lulu is in the river, not at full health. Morgana is in the tri-bush. Lucian lands a lot of harass on her and then doesn't follow it up. He just walks away and lets Vayne go back to the safety of her tower. I'd like to see a bit more aggression coming out from him.
I also have concern with how that... Oh, very nice binding.
Amazing max range binding coming out from Champivore on Morgana. Champivore, I believe, has played twice in our workshops before that I've seen as an ADC, and quite a good one at that. So I can understand why he is playing an effective support. He has been the ADC before, and he understands what role he needs to fulfill.
Agreed. I do have a small concern in how the Lucian ult was used. He tends to not use it in the correct direction. See, there we have the Sejuani combo for it. That gets a free kill for them. I don't know why Yasuo went back in. I think he's going to be able to escape, but I think he could have just run out the other side and been completely safe. At this stage, I would expect them to get away. No. While not the perfect ult, that was a good disengage from Morgana.
Lulu goes in a little too ham. Renekton moves in to escort her out. So right now, Purple Team does have a bit of a gold advantage. Nothing insurmountable, but since they are a late game team, that's not looking good for Blue Team at all. A note about warding. Both supports are warding quite well. What I like to see is I'd like to see jungle and ADC joining in with that, because now that you only have 3 wards, you can keep your lane safe, but you won't be able to cover objectives, you won't be able to cover jungle choke points, and so on. So warding should be really treated as a team effort and consistently done.
Yeah. Now, when Renekton went mid lane there, I just took a quick peek at Mundo. Mundo sort of just stopped in lane for a little bit, and then eventually went and started pushing. In the process of pushing, I first of all noticed that he was missing a lot of CS, so you do always want to work on your CSing. You can always be improved, and that's something you do need to focus on. But just the indecision he seemed to have, where he didn't quite know if he should push or join the fight or what. His teleport was down. He needed to push that as quickly as possible to deny minions to Renekton and try and get a little bit of damage onto that tower, seeing as his own is gone. Unfortunately, nothing really came of it. But that's something that he should have in the back of his mind. You always want to know, okay, given a certain situation, how should I react? And then you need to be able to identify those situations in the future.
I've talked a lot about how players should extend their gold leads into tangible rewards, and Renekton is a perfect example of this. He shoves Mundo in. He has a massive farm advantage, and he's taking the tower, so he just roams down mid lane, and is just a big pain in the butt, and that's really excellent.
So Sejuani, a little bit rough there, eventually lands the ult, but no one is able to quite follow up, unfortunately. I think that she could have played that a lot better. Lulu does get taken down because she is very, very squishy. I like the decision by Max Corners here. Sorry, Max Connors. His name is moving while I try to read it. I like his decision to go after the support rather than Vayne. Vayne's a little bit slippery. I mean, she has her ult barrier and flash up, and Lulu is just so very squishy, right? So the decision to go onto the support rather than the AD carry is... I like it, and a lot of people don't do it. I can't even count the number of times that I've CC'd a really squishy support, and my AD carry starts fighting their AD carry. It's like, dude, just hit them twice and they'll die.
Excellent job on Blue Team. They take Dragon. Sejuani is the only one who's able to contest, and she's at half health. So Blue Team is able to pick up a Dragon without much worry, and that evens out the goal difference.
A good portion of that boils down to, again, the Morgana. she completely zoned Sejuani. Sejuani kept trying to come in, and she's just like, no, binding. No, tormented soil. No, another binding. I'm not letting you through here to try and steal this. And you do need to protect objectives. If you know where their jungler is coming from, just body block them. Don't let them in. Even if you're going to take a little bit of damage, as long as you're not in a huge danger of dying, then just follow it through. Land a bit of CC. Stall them out. Make them think twice about that steal.
Right. Sejuani, we mentioned earlier, she blew her ult. And Sejuani sort of fits into the Season 2 tank meta where you have your ult and your ult is everything. Malphite, Galio, and Amumu were all extremely strong during Season 2. So a lot of newer champs don't really have that restriction. Vi is an excellent example. Her ult is constantly up. But with these more classic tanks, you really have to like preserve your ult for the right time or you will be sitting on your butt feeling useless for 2 minutes.
So it's interesting to me. Lee Sin has landed quite a few kills for himself, but he's significantly behind in CS. About 15 to 20. Personally, on Lee Sin... Oh, he's going for Trinity Force Lee Sin. If I were him, I'd be getting Hydra and taking Wraiths every time it spawns. Hydra is actually really strong on Lee Sin because it allows you to burst very quickly. And, well, yeah, he has some good chase and dueling potential. Having that extra reset in his kit feels good. It makes him feel a lot more smooth in play.
Sejuani is picking up an Abyssal, and I'm frowning at that. I play Sejuani a lot, so it's possible I am just being biased, but I think a Sunfire would be the better choice by far, or even
Agreed.
just another health item. I don't think the Abyssal is necessary. If you want to go damage, you can even go Leandries and Rylai's. But I don't understand the logic behind the Abyssal, especially because Morgana and Gragas, I don't think, are the main threats.
There's two issues with the Abyssal. As you mentioned, it's not the ideal early defensive item. The second issue is that the enemy team does not have a high amount of AP threats. I'm just going to take a peek at this fight. That was a really good pickup for Purple Team, but I'm surprised that Blue could not run from that fight.
Ultimately, I think Sejuani might be getting a little cocky, and I think she might be getting the item damage because she knows she's ahead, and she might be